from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
Today, we are going to be taking a deep dive into the very first Ultimate Fighting Championship event from 1993. If you're a fan of modern MMA, you're probably going to be shocked by just how wild and unhinged things were when it all first started. November 12th, 1993, the McNichols Sports Arena in Denver, Colorado. This was the day that would change combat sports forever. UFC 1 wasn't just another fighting event, it was an experiment that would find out which fighting style was the most dominant of them all. It was the brainchild of Art Davie and Rorion Gracie. This was a tournament of different martial arts. One champion would emerge at the end victorious, proving which was the ultimate fighting style. Art Davie was a marketer, and Rorion Gracie, a jiu-jitsu master, wanted to show the effectiveness of different martial arts by pitting them against each other with almost no restrictions. For the Gracie family, this was a chance to prove the power of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to a wider audience. There were very few rules. In fact, the original UFC was defined by its lack of rules. There were no weight classes, no time limits, and basically no restrictions as far as what could be done. You step into a cage with almost no rules. UFC 1 only had two real rules: no eye gouging and no biting. Fighters were permitted to strike, grapple, even pull hair and stomp. The event would quickly earn a reputation for being one of the rawest spectacles in sports. Eat your heart out, Vince McMahon. The fighters themselves at UFC 1 brought an eclectic mix of styles and personality clashes to the first event. There were sumo wrestlers, karate masters, kickboxers, regular boxers, and a relatively unknown Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter at the time named Royce Gracie. The diversity of fighting styles would become the heart of the unhinged nature of UFC 1. Each competitor brought their own unique style and approach to the UFC octagon. The most unlikely hero of the event ended up being Royce Gracie, the slim Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner who had chosen to prove technique could outmatch raw strength. The matches themselves were where things truly became wild and, as I've said, unhinged. Match number 1 was kickboxer Gerard Gordeau versus Tila Tooley, who was a sumo wrestler. This meant that the opening match was going to be pitting Savate kickboxing against sumo wrestling. Gerard Gordeau was a Savate kickboxer from the Netherlands, and his opponent Tila Tooley was a 400-pound sumo wrestler. This opening fight set the tone for the entire event. Tooley rushed into the match when the bell rang, hoping to overwhelm Gordeau with his size, but Gordeau was able to land a brutal kick to Tooley's face, which knocked out his teeth and ended the opening bout in just 26 seconds. It was a shocking moment that left both the crowd and the organizers stunned by the raw violence that had already revealed itself only in the opening match of this brand new experiment in combat sport. Match number 2 between Kevin Rozier and Zane Frazier pitted kickboxing against karate. Kevin Rozier, a heavyweight kickboxer, went up against karate fighter Zane Frazier in a grueling and intense brawl. This fight managed to last longer than the opening bout, with both men showing signs of fatigue. Eventually, Rozier took down Frazier and finished him with a series of punches and stomps on the ground. The ref stepped in eventually, and Rozier was declared the winner, proving that brute force could indeed sometimes overwhelm finesse. So far, 2 matches in, the UFC experiment was proving to be a thrilling, if not intense and wild, spectacle to behold for the audience. Match number 3 was equally as eccentric. The Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner Royce Gracie took on Art Jimmerson, a professional boxer, who decided to wear one boxing glove on his preferred punching hand and leave the other hand ungloved in order to prevent grapples or kicks, things like that. Jimmerson had basically no grappling experience, and this showed very easily. Royce was able to quickly take him to the ground and apply a submission hold, and Jimmerson had tapped out and lost the match in less than 2 minutes. The dominance of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was starting to become apparent even at this early stage of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Match number 4 pitted Ken Shamrock against Patrick Smith. This match was a more technical bout between Ken Shamrock, a skilled shoot fighter, and Patrick Smith, who was a Taekwondo black belt. Shamrock took Smith down early and secured a leg lock, forcing Smith to tap out. Shamrock's grappling skills proved to be far more advanced, showing the effectiveness of ground techniques over striking, at least at this point in the event. This time we saw Savat being put up against kickboxing. Gordell faced Rozier, who was visibly fatigued and damaged from his first bout. Gordell was able to capitalize on this, striking with hard punches and stiff kicks. Rozier wasn't able to keep up, and Gordell was able to secure the victory by TKO, advancing to the final round in the first ever UFC event. The fifth match was a semi-final bout, which pitted Royce Gracie against Ken Shamrock. Oh, by the way, did I mention that the first UFC event was done in a tournament style? So match number 5 pitted Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu against shoot fighting, and it turned out to be one of the most anticipated fights of the event. Both Gracie and Ken Shamrock were skilled grapplers. Shamrock was confident in the beginning, but Royce took him down and applied a rear naked choke within a minute. Shamrock was forced to tap out, marking another victory for Gracie and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Possibly considered by some an underwhelming bout at this first UFC event, but as we'll see, both of these gentlemen, Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie, would go on to build stellar careers for themselves in the fields of professional fighting. The final match of the event was Royce Gracie versus Gerard Gordell, making it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu versus Savat. Gordell had shown himself to be a formidable striker, but Royce took him down quickly, using his jiu-jitsu to secure a rear naked choke and another tap out, making Royce Gracie the first ever UFC champion and proving that technique and ground fighting could overcome brute strength and size. There was an immediate impact in the aftermath of UFC 1, which drew an 86,000 pay-per-view buys and generated a mix of excitement and controversy. Everyone weighed in after the first ever UFC event. Politicians, martial artists, even medical professionals were quick to condemn it, with some calling it human cockfighting, a stigma that is still sometimes attached to UFC even in the modern day. The brutality of the event led to debates about safety and calls for regulation of mixed martial arts. The raw and chaotic nature of UFC 1 laid the groundwork for modern MMA. Over the years, the UFC would add rules, weight classes, gloves, and time limits, turning it from a spectacle into more of a legitimate sport. However, the unpredictable nature of UFC 1 and the early UFC shows in general will always be remembered as the catalyst for a new era in combat sports. So there you have it. There's my quick recap of UFC number 1. No holds barred, unhinged, absolutely insane in the eyes of a more modern MMA viewer. No rules and an eclectic bunch of characters that felt more like they were pulled out of the world of pro wrestling than mixed martial arts. This is always going to be remembered as one of the most historic and intense events in combat sport history. If you guys enjoyed this breakdown and want to see more about combat sports, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on what you'd like to see next on Psychosi.